based on a true story. An ordinary schoolgirl storms out of her house alone one day due to a quarrel with her mom, unaware that a horrifying event awaits her. A woman skis down a snowy slope and meets an older man. The man later checks out the ladies' room and sees it's empty, allowing the woman to enter as he stands guard. The woman does her business, but she discovers that someone else is present in another cubicle. She hurriedly tells the stranger she's Natasha Campush and that she was abducted. 8 years ago, the young Natasha danced to the crowd singing in a bar. Her father proudly introduced his daughter and encouraged everyone to enjoy the night. After some time, the girl urged her father to send her home, but the drunk man kept bidding for more time. The following day, Natasha woke up exhausted. Her mother called her to hurry since she also had to work. They bantered about the dress her mom had prepared for her because the daughter thought it made her look fat. The mom insisted on wearing it, and after some time, Natasha was finally dressed up. While eating breakfast, the mother noticed how tired her daughter was, so she asked if her father brought her to the bar again. The child lied to protect her father, but the mother knew the truth. She expressed great displeasure about it, so Natasha yelled to leave her alone and denied being at the bar. The mother slapped her, and the angry daughter grabbed her things and left despite her mom's apology. She walked to school alone, and her mother could only watch her from the window. When Natasha turned onto a street with no other people, a van stopped near her, and a man suddenly grabbed her, hitting her head to prevent her from struggling. A schoolgirl saw the ordeal, but after a brief moment, she dismissed what she had witnessed. Soon, the van finally stopped in a quiet neighborhood, and Wolfgang, the man who took Natasha, brought the unconscious kid into the house. Then he laid her in a tiny room with only a sink and a toilet. He locked her in and headed out, revealing that the room was underground and the entryway was a tunnel under a sink covered by a movable cabinet. This was in the basement, and the only way in was a secret door on the floor. Soon Natasha regained consciousness and realized she had been taken. She observed her surroundings and pleaded for help to no avail. Later, Wolfgang arrived with a bed cushion as the child trembled in a corner. Once alone, she called for help again, but all her efforts were futile, so she conserved her energy and ate her food. 3 days later, Wolfgang read a fairy tale book to her, and Natasha, who was calmer now, ate cookies while listening to her captor. The story ended, and the man signaled her to stop eating, to which she immediately complied. She laid on her bed and Wolfgang placed a nightlight. The girl asked questions, but he ignored her, so she requested him to kiss her goodnight since that was what her mom used to do. Therefore, the captor kissed her head and left. Meanwhile, at the Campush residence, Natasha's grandma and mom watched the news about the missing girl. Unfortunately, the authorities couldn't find her. The reporters were also sensationalizing the news as they wrote about the mother being hopeless. On the other hand, the child remained resilient as she was determined to keep track of time, dates, and room measurements. In Wolfgang's residence, the mother prepared his meals, dictating everything he had to do. That evening, news about Natasha's case flashed on the TV, and the mother commented disapprovingly toward the captor while Wolfgang stated that it must be a crazy guy. Once alone, he visited the girl, who handed him a letter for her parents to tell them not to worry. Wolfgang read the letter and helped Natasha wash her hair using only a water bottle. However, he began to control her every action and insulted her worthlessness when she couldn't follow his instructions. Natasha demanded to be released because her family loved her, but her captor insisted that no one loved her because they wouldn't even pay a ransom. The captor got angrier as she sobbed, so he roughly washed her hair, which created a mess, escalating the man's anger as he couldn't stand a messy place. Wolfgang's grandma and mom visited him for afternoon coffee the following day. The police arrived to check his white van, which was reported to be seen where Natasha went missing. The captor calmly spoke with the cops as he explained that he watched the news, so the police answered that they already inspected numerous white vans with tinted windows. As they inspected the van, they asked about his work, and he told them that he was a telecommunications company technician but was currently unemployed. Wolfgang became anxious as the other cops stood on the secret door on his garage floor while taking some pictures of the area for filing purposes. When asked about his whereabouts on the day Natasha went missing, he answered that he was home alone. But to remove suspicion, he invited the police to have coffee with his mom and grandma who came to visit. Upon seeing the elderly ladies, the cops left. Meanwhile, Natasha reminisced about her precious moments with her parents when they were still together. When the captor revisited the girl, he installed an intercom so that he could hear what she was up to even when he was upstairs. 183 days later, the girl had become accustomed to her life as she played pretend with her old clothes as her companions. One day, she pretended to be a news reporter interviewing Natasha about how she escaped her captor. However, she couldn't think of an answer when she asked how she fled since he was way bigger than her. Suddenly, Wolfgang spoke through the intercom, startling the girl. He asked if she brushed her teeth and washed her dishes. Knowing the girl did not, he authoritatively repeated the phrase "obey me" like a broken record. Annoyed, Natasha played with her toothpaste and noticed it could stick to her skin as it dried. When Wolfgang gave her food, she pretended that her arm was injured, presenting the dried toothpaste as a wound while requesting to be sent to the doctor. Upon discovering the girl's intent to escape, he punished her by refusing to feed her, stating that she was fat. Natasha aggressively yelled for help, and the man subdued her. Then, he showed her how impossible it was to escape since the tunnel was underground. 4 days passed and the girl had nothing to eat. Despite standing her ground by keeping herself busy and drinking water, she finally gave in and asked for food through the intercom. With no answer on the other end, she angrily demanded food, but her yells soon died down to pleading as the hopelessness washed over her. Silently listening upstairs, Wolfgang was satisfied to hear the despair in her voice, so he repeated, "Obey me." 4 years later, the captor remained the same, trying to brainwash her to do everything he wanted by repeating "obey me" via the intercom while deliberately starving her. One day, her first menstruation arrived, and Wolfgang felt utterly disgusted by the mess, so Natasha grabbed the chance to convince him she needed to shower upstairs. Finally, the captive saw how secluded her room was from the underground. The man threatened her that he had placed explosives by the door and window so she'd be gone if she escaped. Despite wanting to flee, Natasha held it in and obeyed Wolfgang's instructions until she reached the bathroom. One day, his mother arrived again, commanding him to do everything she wanted, especially what food to eat and keeping the house squeaky clean. As she headed out, she noticed a strand of blonde hair stuck on her son's shirt, so she asked if it was from a girlfriend. The mom didn't wait for his response and said she was relieved as she thought he preferred men. Because of this, he immediately shaved Natasha's hair, leaving the distressed woman brokenhearted. Christmas arrived and they celebrated it together. Natasha decorated her room and Wolfgang presented her gifts while recording a video of her as she opened them. However, he dictated how the lady should act in every little thing, spoiling Natasha's fun. The captive thanked him for the gift even though she already memorized all the books she received. She hugged the man in gratitude, upsetting him. Then she asked about her family, but Wolfgang angrily told her that her only family was him. Because of this, he commanded her to choose her new name. Natasha picked Viviana, but Wolfgang insisted on calling her Vivi. In the campus's residence, Natasha's grandma and mom celebrated Christmas grimly as the older lady knitted a sweater for her granddaughter to use when she returned. The mom expressed her greatest regret for letting her leave alone that day since she used to bring her to school daily in her car. At Wolfgang's residence, the man renovated the house with Natasha's assistance. When she asked if the renovation was for a girlfriend moving in, her captor madly pounded on the dry cement mix with his mallet, leaving Natasha covered in dirt. Despite her shock, the captive remained composed and requested a shower. He granted permission but declared that she'd sleep upstairs with him tonight. That evening in his bedroom, Wolfgang prepared a cable tie, and Natasha presented both of her wrists, but the man tied one of her hands with his instead as they laid on the bed together. Soon after, Natasha remained utterly obedient to her captor and gently requested to go out. Wolfgang told her she might if she behaved, so she calmly returned to her room as the man left the house. He dropped by the grocery store to grab sanitary pads for Natasha and took boxes of protection for intimacy. He went to a bar to party that night, but when a woman alluringly danced with him, he felt disgusted and left. Upon returning home, he slept with his captive and routinely tied her hand to his. However, this time, he stole the woman's innocence while Natasha remained calm. After the deed, she requested to see the garden, which Wolfgang permitted. Tied to each other, they walked outside under the moonlight. As the captive basked under the night sky, the man began walking back to the house. However, Natasha stopped and mentioned that they were tied together, which agitated Wolfgang more, so he brought her to her basement room. Contrary to the captor's mood, Natasha danced happily in her room. Wolfgang became more controlling the following day and found fault in everything Natasha did, but the lady remained submissive. She stared at the forest wall decoration in the kitchen to console herself and imagined roaming freely. Unfortunately, her happiness was short-lived as Wolfgang didn't give her any food. When he briefly walked away, the hungry captive desperately took his food and shoved it in her mouth. So the man tried to stop her and vented his frustrations in his attacks. As days passed, he became harsher to her, not allowing her to wear clothes and trapping her underground as a joke. She headed back up and punched him in anger, so he shaved her hair again. But she didn't shed a tear this time and firmly declined. Surprisingly, Wolfgang walked away. The following days were more peaceful as the man became kinder, providing her with proper clothes and driving around town with her. Despite his threats that he had a gun and could shoot her or anyone else if she escaped, things went smoothly. They went to a hardware store, where the man brutally grabbed her nape to keep her from looking at the people. Wolfgang left her by herself, and lots of people passed by Natasha. Despite her desire to ask for help, the captive became paralyzed as she heard her captor's voice in her head, whispering, "Obey me." Ultimately, Natasha failed to talk to anyone until the man returned. She held his hand as they left the hardware while looking back at the people who could have helped her. 2,175 days in captivity, Natasha renovated her new room in the attic. Wolfgang happily took a video of her struggling to lay the heavy carpet with her skinny body. She masked her frustrations and posed alluringly in front of the camera to satisfy her captor. Days later, the man covered the woman's eyes and brought her to her new bedroom. Natasha pretended to be surprised and grateful, like she was seeing the place for the first time despite being the one who built it. Days later, Wolfgang's mom arrived and saw the new bedroom. She praised his excellent taste and commented that the house now fits 2 people. The son then escorted her to a bar he made outside and presented her with his homemade cocktail while dancing to entertain his mother. Meanwhile, Natasha heard the news on the radio about her disappearance, making her depressed. Wolfgang interrupted her alone time as the bed they ordered had arrived. Soon, he gifted her lingerie for their wedding night while keeping their hands tied to each other. Natasha finally asked him why he chose her, and he explained it was because he saw her smile. 6 years ago, Wolfgang was a customer in the shop of Natasha's mom, and that was when he first saw her smiling while eating some cookies. It took him 10 months to prepare for everything: the pipes, the cables, the ventilation, all to create her bedroom. Natasha listened silently, and then Wolfgang cut the cable tie around their hands to consummate their wedding night. Once alone in her basement room, Natasha yelled in frustration as she grasped how intricate the predator planned to get her. Hopeless, she turned on an electric stove and burned some tissue paper. As the smoke spread, she cradled her old dress and suffocated herself. However, she changed her mind and cleaned everything so her captor won't notice. Unfortunately, Wolfgang smelled the smoke and relentlessly hit her, commanding her not to end her life. Natasha told him to let her go. If not, one of them should perish. Starting then, the captive jotted down on the tissue paper every hit she received from her captor while narrating it loudly, knowing that the man was listening through the intercom. 2,847 days after abducting her, Wolfgang brings her to a ski resort where he forces her to ski despite her frail body. She excuses herself for a bathroom break as the man checks the restroom and stands guard outside. The toilet next to her flushes, and she discovers that there's someone she can ask for help. She introduces herself and asks for help, but unfortunately, the woman speaks another language and fails to understand her. As they arrive home, Wolfgang asks about the incident, and when Natasha dismisses it, he hits her repeatedly. Instead of being discouraged, Natasha's eyes light with more determination as she notes every hit she receives. Afterward, Natasha is granted permission to stay in the garden to help Wolfgang. Then, an elderly neighbor unexpectedly climbs a ladder on her property to trim her hedge, seeing the man and the woman. The captor grasps the woman inconspicuously, and she fails to ask for help again. Returning to her room, she trashes things as she insults herself in front of the mirror. Months go by peacefully as Natasha remains obedient. One day, Wolfgang decides to sell the van to have more money for both of them, so he instructs Natasha to clean it. As she does, she notices that the gate is ajar. She resumes cleaning while thinking, and Wolfgang playfully spanks her back. His phone rings, and he speaks to the buyer, turning away from his captive due to the vacuum's noise. Determined, Natasha lets go of the vacuum and runs out of the house. Wolfgang realizes too late that she escaped while the woman does her best to get away as far as possible. The captive barges into a yard of an elderly woman and asks her to call the police. She explains that she is Natasha Kampusch and has been abducted. On day 3096, Natasha sits anxiously in the elderly woman's garden while waiting for the police. The cops arrive and ask for her identification, but all she can say is her name and that she was taken 8 years ago. Soon, Natasha's mother receives a call about her daughter. While the cops drive Natasha to the police station, she asks them about Wolfgang and discovers that he cowardly took his life by lying on the railroad as a train approached. Moments later, her parents arrive at the station. They stare at each other, and Natasha mumbles to call her mom. Finally, they embrace each other as they silently sob. After the reunion, the police escort Natasha out as the press swarm in front of the police station. While in the car on her way home with her parents, Natasha recalls what she told Wolfgang. Only one of them will survive. She tearfully smiles as she becomes the survivor.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.